Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 9 articles in 2 different sections. In the analysis part, we'll first have a discussion with respect to the various aspects of India's gig economy and the issues associated with it. In the second article, we'll have a discussion with respect to the importance, challenges, and the way forward with respect to India's textile industry. Then, in the simplified sections, we'll have a look at 7 different articles along with the value addition. So stay tuned. Now, coming to the very first article, it is about India's gig economy. So recently we had a particular report by the name of Fair Work India Ratings 2024. Now this particular report talks about the different e-commerce platforms in the country. And the report says that most of the operations in these e-commerce platforms, they are actually driven by these gig workers. However, these companies, these e-commerce platforms, they're still non-committal about ensuring the local living wages for these workers and recognizing their right to collective representation. Now, this topic of gig economy becomes really important for us. Now, this is a part of GS3, Indian economy. See, if we talk about this word gig economy, now we are familiar with this. In the last 3-4 years, we have been having a lot of discussions with respect to the gig economy. And again, the discussions have been centered around with respect to the poor conditions of the gig workers, right? So this issue becomes really important and therefore we would try to comprehensively analyze it. Now, what is a gig economy? First of all, see, gig economy is a labor market scenario which is actually characterized by short-term, freelance work or contract-based work arrangements. That is on a need basis, not on a permanent basis. Then these gig economy, it is often facilitated through the online platforms. See, we have got Uber, ride hailing services, right? Or we have Urban Company, or we have Dunzo. So we have got different online platforms. And primarily, it is these online platforms who are recruiting the major portion of these gig workers. Again, the gig economy, it actually represents a shift towards a more flexible, task-based and on-demand workforce. That is on a need basis, right? You are not having the tasks which are actually aligned continuously. It is on a need basis that these firms, these platforms are providing you the work. Now, the workers who are actually in the gig economy, they're termed by various names. Now, sometimes they're known as independent contractors, freelancers, or part-time workers. You also must have heard about the word partners, delivery partners, right? So that is the kind of vocab or the language we use for these gig workers. Now, if you go into the numbers, so we have a particular report. Now this report, the data is sourced from the Niti Aayog. So we have got the data, the source is the Niti Aayog. Now, if you see the numbers, what you will see is that almost 77 lakh Indians, they are currently engaged in the gig work, 7.7 million, right? And then since this report talks about the period of October 22 till January 23, it also talks about, it said that almost 99 lakh people, equivalent to 1 crore, Indians are expected to be the gig workers by 2023. And it says that India is projected to have almost 23.5 million, that is 2.35 crore million gig workers by 2029-30. Now this would represent almost 4.1% of the total workforce, right? Now, if you go in a sector-wise analysis, what you will see is that almost 27 lakh people, lakh Indians, they are actually engaged in retail trade and sales. Then you have almost 13 lakh Indian gig workers who are engaged in the transportation sector. Then you have got almost 6 lakh Indian gig workers who are a part of the manufacturing sector. Then you have almost 6 lakh Indian gig workers who are a part of finance and insurance services. Then you have got almost 25 lakh Indian gig workers who are a part of e-commerce websites. Now, this is a sector-wise breakup. Now, if you go into the different sectors, as I just said, so we have got the transports and logistics. The example can be the Uber and Ola, right? Then we have got the food delivery and e-commerce. For example, we have Zomato, Swiggy, Amazon, Flipkart. Then we have got the personal services, for example, Urban Company. Then we have got Housejoy, right? Then we have got the freelancers. So we have got freelance workers also, who are also a part of the gig economy, right? Please understand, it's not just these platform workers. It's not just these delivery executives. We have got some of the highly skilled professionals who are also a part of the gig economy, right? So we have got designers, writers, software developers on platforms like Upwork and freelancers. Then we have got healthcare with respect to the healthcare and education. So for example, we have got the online tutors, we have got telemedicine professionals, right? Again, if we talk about the demography, the kind of persons who are actually the major part of the gig economy, what we would see is that the most of the gig workers are in the age bracket of 18 to 35 years, right? So if you just break down the gig workforce of India, you will see that we have almost 48% share, which is for 26 to 40 years. Then we have got 20% share, which is from 41 to 60 years. And then we have got 32% share with respect to 19 to 25 years. This is the age-wise division or the breakup, right? Now, if we talk about the skills, right? So as I just said, that's not just these delivery partners or the drivers. We have got some of the very highly skilled professionals also, right? So the gig workers range from low skilled delivery agents to highly skilled. For example, we have got freelance developers, right? Software makers, right? Now, if we talk about the skill analysis, so almost 31% of these people who are engaged in the gig economy, they are low skilled. For example, we have got the cab drivers, delivery executives, pickers and packers, right? Then we have got the highly skilled ones, right? Now, before we discuss the highly skilled ones, please see that the low skilled and the medium skilled, they comprise the majority of the workers. 47% here and 31% here. So we have got almost 78 to 80% who are low skilled and medium skilled. So we have got a very small chunk of the population which is highly skilled. Only 22% of which are actually the independent consultants or administrative assistants, graphic designers, substitute instructors, tutors, and content writers, right? So that is basically the division, the segregation on the basis of the skills, right, which these people have. Now, next is that what is the range of the income which these gig workers have. So while some of the highly skilled workers, they earn substantial incomes, but most of the gig workers, especially in the delivery services, they earn lower wages with inconsistent income flows. There are high fluctuations in the income. They are not getting a regular fixed source of income, right? Please understand. Now, what are the factors which have driven the growth of gig economy in India? The very first is increased smartphone and internet penetration. See, in the last 1 or 2 decades, what we have witnessed is that there has been a tremendous growth in the internet penetration, even in the rural areas, right? And people are more and more getting the smartphones. Now, what happens is that once you have got access to these smartphones and the internet, it basically, the businesses get the opportunity to contact different workers, right? They can easily contact different workers, also the consumers. So it facilitates the whole process. Next is changing work preferences. Now see, we have got the millennials, the Gen Z. Now, the people in the Gen Z and these millennials, they actually prioritize work-life balance. They are giving more importance to the flexibility, right? They want that they should choose the kind of work they have to do, or they should choose the timelines of the delivery of the project, right? So this offers flexibility. Next is rise of e-commerce and startup culture. Now we all know that India is one of the largest destinations when we talk about the startups, when we talk about the incubation centers, right? We have got growing numbers of unicorns in the country. So again, what I'm trying to showcase, what I'm trying to tell is that once you have got these e-commerce and startups, they are heavily reliant on these contract workers. They're heavily reliant on these gig workers, independent contractors, and thus it propels the gig economy. Next is consumer demand for convenient and quick services. Now this is very important. See, the urban culture, rise in the consumerism, growing disposable incomes, all these factors, won't make the people that they should go for convenience rather than, taking a lot of stress for getting these services. So what happens is that these startups or these platforms, they make sure that you have got convenient and quick delivery of services, right? And that is what is needed by different consumers. Next is abundance of low-cost labor in India. See, please understand that in India, the majority, as I just said, we have got a huge pool of low-skilled or medium-skilled people. And there is lack of formal employment opportunities. We have got very few formal employment opportunities. And that is the reason what you're witnessing is that a lot of people are actually being absorbed in the gig economy sector. So, right. So these are the factors which is driving the growth of gig economy in the country. Now, let's talk about what are the challenges faced by gig workers in India. The very first is lack of basic rights and social security. See, please understand that we have got permanent workers. Now, these permanent workers have access to social security benefits. They have access to various social security benefits, for example, health insurance, for example, life insurance cover, for example, maternity benefit, or let's say the retirement pensions. But these benefits, these social security benefits are not available with respect to the gig workers, right? So that is one of the most important points with respect to the gig workers. Next is, now again, one point which I would like to stress upon here is that these workers who are part of the gig economy, they are actually termed as partners. They are termed as independent contractors, freelance workers, right? They are not termed as employees, right? And therefore they don't have access to these social security benefits. Next is precarious employment and income insecurity. See, once a person is working as a gig worker for a particular platform, the incomes are based on the demand of the product which is being raised on that particular platform. That is what I mean to say is that the income is not consistent. There are huge fluctuations in the incomes. Moreover, they can be removed at any point of time. These gig workers can be removed at any point of time. Therefore, they don't have any security of tenure, right? Next is exploitation and unfair treatment. See, most of these gig workers, they have complained that they are being overworked, right? Again, I'll tell you the reason. The reason is with respect to the algorithms. So these delivery executives or the cab drivers, they have to perform a certain minimum number of tasks, right? And only after that, they can actually relieve themselves. But again, see, what happens is that this is being run by the algorithm, right? And there is no human intervention. And therefore, it leads to very tough working conditions. Next is health and safety risks. We have got some of these delivery executives who, travel a lot of distance during rains, during heat stress, right? During heat waves, right? So what I'm trying to say is that they suffer from very tough working conditions. And that is something which affects their health and overall well-being. Next is lack of collective bargaining power. As we have the unions or we have got the group of people in the permanent sector, in the formal employment scenario, we don't have such a system for these informal workers, for these gig workers, sorry. So what I mean to say is that they don't have the bargaining power. They cannot unionize. They cannot come and seek their rights, right? So that is a major issue. Next is digital divide and skill gaps. Again, what we are trying to emphasize is that though these platforms are run on an online basis, we have got the e-commerce platforms and other things, but still we have got these delivery executives or the cab drivers. They don't have the requisite digital skills. And that is something which actually hinders their social mobility, right? If you are providing them with adequate skills, they can actually access better employment opportunities, but that is not happening. Next is algorithmic management. Again, this is what I wanted to convey. See, the number of tasks or the amount of pay which is to be given to that particular person, a gig worker, it is actually determined by the algorithm, which is a system of software, a particular series of steps. So again, there is no human intervention. And what happens is that these algorithms, they are mostly arbitrary in nature. And they compromise the overall well-being of the gig workers, right? So that is where we have got the algorithmic management, which is responsible for the poor conditions of the workers. Now, what have been the government initiatives and schemes? The very first is Code on Social Security 2020. Now, again, this is for the unorganized workers and it includes these gig workers as a part of the workforce. Again, what this particular Code on Social Security is trying to do is it is trying to extend the social security benefits to these gig workers also. So we have a provision with respect to the Social Security Fund where the government, where the platform workers and even the gig workers are expected to contribute, and then that fund would be used for the overall well-being of these gig workers. Then we have got the e-Shram portal. See, e-Shram portal was launched by the government to register the unorganized workers, all the unorganized workers, including the gig workers. Now, see, this e-Shram portal gives a unique identification number to every worker, to every unorganized worker who is a part of the unorganized sector. Now, once you have got a person with a particular UIN number, then that person can access various government services. That is what the benefit of E-Shram portal is all about. So as of February 2023, we have almost 280 million people who have registered on this particular E-Shram portal. Then we have got the Skill India and Digital India initiatives. Now see, what this Skill India and Digital India trying to do is, they are actually trying to upskill. They are trying to impart different higher level skills to these workers so that they can access the better opportunities, right? And they can have social mobility. They can raise their ladder in the social sphere so as to provide better opportunities. Then we have got different initiatives by different state governments. For example, we have got the State Gig Welfare Board by Karnataka. Now this tries to provide the insurance coverage or with respect to the accident coverage with respect to these gig workers. Then we have got the labor welfare schemes. So we have got Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Mandhan Yojana. Now this aims to provide the pensions after the age of 60. Now this also is based on the contributions by the workers, but again this is a social security scheme, very important by the government. Now what should be the way forward with respect to these gig workers or the gig economy as a whole? First is that there has to be legal recognition and classification. What we are trying to say is, you are not telling that this is a particular employee. You are saying that this person is a delivery partner, or he or she is a sort of an independent contractor, or let's say he or she is a freelance worker. Again, what we are trying to say is, you have to give a legal definition, right, as we have for the employee, so that they can also access various social security benefits. Next is improving social security coverage. So again, we have this code on social security, but it is still in the implementation mode. It has not been fully implemented. And what is needed is a quick and robust implementation of social security code. Then we have got minimum wages and work hour regulation. Very important. See, as we have got the minimum wage for the other sectors, what is needed is that we also have this minimum wage provision for the gig workers. And there has to be a provision with respect to the maximum number of hours for which the person can work, right? So that there is adequate emphasis on the overall well-being of these gig workers also. Then we have got digital and financial literacy programs. So the government should focus upon imparting skills, let's say in technology, in finance, in communications, so that people can acquire these skills and access better opportunities, right? So that they don't remain restricted to being as a delivery executive or a driver, right? Next is platform accountability. There has to be transparency when we talk about the algorithm, right? These algorithms should not be arbitrary in nature. They should not allot work, or they should not determine the pay arbitrarily. There has to be human intervention. And if there is no human intervention, there has to be transparency in that, right? So there has to be fair compensation with respect to these gig workers. And there has to be proper grievance redressal mechanism. Then we have got the welfare boards and the worker cooperatives. See, there has to be the institutionalization of these worker boards. So that, and especially at the state level, for example, we have that in case of Karnataka. So that they can provide timely aid to these people. Let's say if a person has suffered an accident, so these welfare boards can provide the adequate funds, right? Or let's say if someone has died in course of performing their work, so these welfare boards or cooperatives can give adequate finance support to their families, right? Then we have got health and safety standards, very important. So what we saw during the heat waves was that many of these delivery executives, they succumbed because of the extreme heat waves conditions. Again, there has to be adequate provisions, and these platforms need to take the responsibility. Be it Zomato, be it Swiggy, or any platform, they need to take the responsibility with respect to the overall well-being of these gig workers, right? So what we are saying is that gig economy, definitely it is offering immense potential. It has a lot of scope, and definitely it is offering flexible work environments. It has definitely a lot of pros with it. But what we need to emphasize is that the condition of the workers is not good. And primarily these majority of the workers who are working for these platforms, their overall well-being is at stake. So what we need to have is a proper mechanism. These mechanisms, these government initiatives need to be made more robust, and these steps must be taken so that the overall gig economy is foolproof, it's robust, and then we can have it is not just beneficial for the platforms, gig economy, so that we can ensure that it's not just beneficial for the platforms, but also beneficial for the gig workers at large. So that is what you need to know with respect to this particular article. Now, let's examine a particular question. Now, the first is a previous year's question. It says, examine the role of gig economy in the process of empowerment of women in India, right? So it's just of 150 words, 10 marks. Then there's a practice question. The question says, gig economy in India offers great potential to transform the overall labor market and enhance economic returns. However, it faces some serious challenges which need adequate policy response. Discuss. 15 marks, 250 words. Do write a particular answer on this question. Now, before we go to the next topic, I have one quick question for you to assess your preparation level. The question is very simple. We have got the isthmus of Kra. I'm repeating. We have got the isthmus of Kra. Now, this actually separates two water bodies. Tell me the names of these two water bodies. Let me see who answers first in the comment section. So coming to the next article, it is with respect to the India's textile industry. So we have got a particular piece of article in the Hindu, and it talks about the various issues which this particular sector is plaguing with, right? And we also have the Union Minister for Textiles, and he has said that the Indian textile and apparel sector is aiming for a total business of more than $350 billion annually by 2030. And it is set to generate 3.5 crore jobs, right? So this particular sector becomes really important. We'll try to comprehensively analyze it. Now, this is a part of GS3 Indian economy. Now, if we look at the textile sector, the textile industry, it is one of the oldest and most significant industries. Now, why it is one of the significant industries is because it is not just the contribution made to the Indian economy. It's also about the employment opportunities it is giving to millions of people. So if you look at the number of people employed in the textile sector, we have almost 45 million people who are employed directly. That is 4.5 crore people. And we have almost 10 crore people who are actually employed indirectly in the textile sector. Now, again, if you look at the contribution made by this sector to the employment, exports and GDP, what we can see is that it is contributing almost 11% to India's export earnings, and it contributes to 2.3% to India's GDP, right? Now, this data has been sourced from India Brand Equity Foundation, IBEF, right? Now, if you look at the market size of the textile industry, so in the year 2023, the total valuation of the textile industry was almost $160 billion. And what is actually forecasted is that it would have a total value of $250 billion by the year 2030. And that is what the Union Textiles Minister is saying. Now, we are going to raise this to $350 billion. Now, again, if you look at the total trade, textile trade, you will see that it was in the year of financial year 2022, where we actually exported almost $45 billion of textiles, right? So this is a huge number. Now, if you look at the share of India's textile exports for the financial year 24, what you would see is that the ready-made garments, it comprises almost 42.4%, right? Then we have got the cotton yarn, fabrics, made-ups, handloom products, which comprise 34%. Then we have got man-made yarns, fabrics and made-ups, which constitutes 13.6%. Then we have got handicrafts, excluding handmade carpets and others. Then if we talk about the total fabric production in the financial year 24, what we would see is that we have got cotton yarn in million square meters, the numbers, it is 952. Then we have got the blended and 100% non-cotton yarn, almost 432. Then we have got the man-made filament yarn, 450. And then we have got man-made fiber, that is 511. You don't need to memorize these numbers, but for the sake of the analysis part, I have given it. Now, if we look at the various subsectors of the textile industry, what we would see is that we have got at the first, the cotton textiles. And India is one of the largest producers of cotton textiles in the world, and we have got almost 25% of the global output, which is contributed by India. Then we have got the handlooms and crafts. Again, one of the largest producers in the world with respect to the handlooms and the crafts, handicrafts. Then we have got the ready-made garments. India is becoming an export hub for the ready-made garments, right? Obviously, we have got other countries, for example, Bangladesh, Vietnam, but India is also competing equally with the other countries. Then we have got the new emerging concept of technical textiles. Now see, let's first talk about what are technical textiles. See, we have got the textiles which are mostly used for decorative purpose. But if we have got textiles where the objective is not for the decorative aspect, but for the performance ability, then that is with respect to the technical textiles, right? So we have got geotextiles, smart textiles, medical textiles. India is becoming a hub of these technical textiles. Now, what are the key markets? We have got the United States, we have got the European Union, we have got United Arab Emirates, and we have got Bangladesh. Then India is also one of the largest producers of jute and silk, and it actually exports various jute and silk items across the world. Now, what are the issues and challenges with respect to the textile sector? The very first is fragmentation of industry. What I mean by this is that we have got the prevalence of a large number of small and unorganized players. We don't have got a large number of big players. What we have is a large number of small and marginalized players, right? And that actually affects the efficiency and economies of scale. Again, what we're trying to say is that these small players, they don't have adequate resources with them. They don't have adequate technology with them, right? And that actually compromises the product quality or their productivity. Next is outdated technology, as I just said. So most of these persons engaged in the textile sector, they are using obsolete technology, right? And that technology is obviously affecting the product quality and the efficiency, the overall efficiency, right? So it affects the productivity and the product quality, and it hampers the overall competitiveness of Indian textiles. Next is high production costs. What we are seeing is that in India, we have got high production costs with respect to the raw materials, labor, and power, right? And this increases the overall cost of the final product, right? And the brunt has to be borne by the end consumer. Then we have got restrictive labor laws. See, the problem is that in India, we have got certain labor laws which actually prohibit the quick hiring and firing policy. Again, these textiles, once you have got the players who are small in number, right, or who are small in their capacity, what I'm trying to say is that they don't have the adequate resources to recruit people permanently. This is something which is a seasonal sector, right? But because of these restrictive labor laws, they're unable to recruit, right? And they're also unable to formalize. Next is inadequate infrastructure. So we have got the shortage of logistics, storage and transportation facilities, which obviously hampers the overall productivity of the sector, right? And we have got poor access to the ports and slow custom clearances. Now, please understand, if you have got these poor access to ports and slow custom clearances, obviously it would affect the export competitiveness of textiles in the country, right? Next is competition from neighboring countries. So as I just said, we have got countries like Bangladesh, Vietnam, or China. They are offering lower labor costs, and they're also offering superior export incentives, right? And India is trying, but in comparison to these countries, we are not doing the same, right? Next is with respect to the environmental concerns. What I'm trying to say is that we have got some of the subsectors of the textile industry, for example, the dyeing or the finishing. Now, they are actually very polluting industries, and they have got a huge carbon footprint, right? And again, the compliance with respect to the international environment standards, it remains a challenge for these firms. Because again, see, if you have countries like EU or the Western countries, if they are actually demanding a particular product from India, they would expect that you are abiding by the environmental standards. And that is not being followed by the major number of these textile producers in the country. Then we have got the COVID-19 impact. Now again, this becomes really important because during the COVID, we had several of these industries, small players, who were actually decimated, completely extinguished from the market, right? So it led to huge job losses and supply chain disruptions. And obviously, it affected the overall sector in general, right? Then there's the issue of lack of branding and marketing. Again, if you don't have a proper marketing strategy, obviously, you won't be able to sell your product globally, right? So what happens is that it reduces the global recognition and ultimately the demand. So there has to be adequate emphasis on the marketing of the product, right? Then what have been the government initiatives for the same? So we have got first the production linked incentive scheme for the textiles, which was launched in the year 2021. Now the government aimed to give the incentives more than 10,500 crores in this particular PLI scheme, and this was primarily to boost the domestic manufacturing and promote the large scale investment in man-made fibers, apparels and technical textiles. So we all know the production linked incentive, it basically incentivizes the producer for the incremental growth in the overall production, right? So that scheme is obviously also for the textiles. Then we have got the scheme for integrated textile parks. Now this scheme, it primarily aims to provide world-class infrastructure for setting up of these textile parks, right? So that they can have adequate logistics, so that they can have adequate power, adequate water supply, right? And till now what we see is that 66 textile parks have been approved and almost 23 are functional. Then we have got the National Technical Textile Mission, which I was just talking about. Now this aims to promote the technical textiles, for example medical textiles, for example the geotextiles, for example the smart textiles, right? And it aims to make India global hub for manufacturing these technical textiles. Next, we have got the very important amended technology upgradation fund scheme. Now this aims to provide capital subsidies for upgrading the machinery. Primarily, it is making sure that these small players, primarily the small players, they have got the access to the recent technologies so that they can increase their overall productivity and overall efficiency of the supply chain, right? As of 22, more than 6,000 crores have been sanctioned for this particular scheme. Then we have got SUMMER scheme, that is the scheme for capacity building in the textile sector. Capacity building means that it is trying to focus upon building the skills in this particular sector for the skill development and employment to the youth, and it aims to train almost 10 million people in 5 years. Then we have got the Mega Integrated Textile Region and Apparel Park Scheme, also known as MITRA scheme. Now this was launched in the year 2021. Now this aims to create 7 textiles mega park with modern infrastructure, with state-of-the-art facilities, with proper technology, with proper logistics, with proper power sources, with proper water supply, right? So that these hubs can become the center of the export, center for domestic consumptions, right? And integrated logistics. Then we have got various export promotion schemes. For example, we have got the rebate on the state and central taxes and levies. Again, these schemes basically try to incentivize the producers, right? So that their overall costs reduces to boost the textiles and the garments exports. Then we have got the handloom and handicrafts development. For example, we have got the National Handloom Development Program, or we have got the Comprehensive Handloom Cluster Development Scheme. Now, both these schemes, they are actually trying to propel or boost the handloom sector, right? Support for marketing, skill development, infrastructure for the handloom sector in particular. Now, what should be the way forward? The first and foremost is that there has to be focus on modernization and technology upgradation. Very important. See, most of the players in the textile sector, they are using obsolete technology we just discussed. So there has to be adequate provisions with respect to the modern technology. There has to be capital subsidies schemes, right? The government needs to provide credit for the upgradation of technology, right? So there needs to be acceleration with respect to the modernization of these traditional sector. Traditional sector means the handlooms or the handicrafts. We also need to adopt the industry 4.0 technologies. What we mean to say is that we can have got the integration of artificial intelligence, machine learning, or other modern technologies in this particular sector. Then there has to be focus upon building the infrastructure. So we should focus upon developing the textile clusters, mega parks, and improving access to ports, roads, and logistics. Ultimately, what we are trying to say is that whatever a particular textile unit needs, you need to provide all those services. Be it the logistics, be it the power supply, be it the water supply, that has to be consistent. Then enhancing the export competitiveness. What we should focus upon is enhanced focus on branding and marketing, so that we can have got global recognition in the market. And that would obviously spur or increase the demand of that particular product. We also can explore various trade agreements with key markets. For example, we already know that a lot of textile products are being exported to UAE or let's say US or European Union. So we can have strategic trade agreements with these countries, right? And then that would obviously give a boost to the domestic manufacturing in India. Then focus has to be on sustainability. So as I just said, we have got few sub-sectors in the overall textile sector which are highly polluting in nature, right? Which are actually not compliant with this environmental standards. So what we have to focus upon is the adoption of eco-friendly practices, promoting the use of organic cotton and reducing the water and chemical usage. Again, if we'll go for this organic cotton, for example, let's say, so that is a product which is in a very high demand in these economies, in the economies of US or the European Union, right? So we should also focus upon this. Next is, there has to be diversification into technical textiles. This is something which is the future. It means that there is going to be a very high demand for these technical textiles. And that is the reason we have got the National Technical Textiles Mission, right? So adequate focus has to be on the rapidly growing technical textiles segment, potential to boost the domestic demand and the exports. We should not only focus upon the domestic demand, but also make sure that we can export these technical textiles to various markets around the world. Then adequate focus has to be given to the skill development aspect. Again, you have to make the workers skilled, right? So that they can, once they have got access to different technologies, the overall productivity can increase. They need to be given the skills with respect to the new age technologies, right? So especially the semi-skilled and the unskilled segments need to be given these skills. For example, we have got the Summit scheme for capacity building in textile sector. So that should be expanded to cover the new age skills. People should be taught how to actually utilize or integrate different technologies into the textile sector. Then there has to be policy reforms and ease of doing business. So adequate emphasis has to be placed on simplifying the labor laws, making sure that these labor laws, they actually are conducive for the textile sector. They should not be a burden for the textile sector, right? Then there has to be focus upon providing tax incentives, creating favorable environment for foreign investments. Very important. So we have got a number of players, outside players, foreign players who are investing in India. So you need to give them adequate opportunities. You need to provide them single window clearance. You need to give them adequate incentives so that they can invest in India. Again, what we're trying to say is that the textile sector is very, very important, right? And it's a source of employment for millions of people. But there are issues with respect to this sector, and we have to focus upon these steps in order to make sure that we have got a very robust textile sector and we can have more technology integrated in these sectors. We can have different, marketing and branding. We can have other steps which should be taken in order to make the overall sector productive in nature, right? So that is what you need to know with respect to this particular article. Before we go to the next section, we have got a mains practice question. The question says that textile industry in India not only contributes significantly to the economy, but is one of the mainstay of employment sources. However, in the recent times, this sector is struggling with various issues. Elaborate. So do write a particular answer on this question. So coming to the simplified section, we have got the first article, that is making machines learn. So we have got the Nobel Prize in Physics. Now this has been given to two persons. First is John Hopfield, and then we have got Geoffrey Hinton. Now again, see, the prize has been given with special reference to the artificial intelligence. Now artificial intelligence has become a buzzword. Now the prize has been given for two aspects, right? First is artificial neural network, and second is the machine learning. Now see, there are a lot of complicated technologies which are mentioned in this article, right? And mostly once we go through the science and technology part, obviously there is the dominance of very complex technical terms. That is what is not needed for the exam. What UPSC expects is that you have got a fair good knowledge with respect to how those technologies work, right? What are the possible applications? What are the possible concerns? And what should be the way forward, right? So we'll try to analyze this particular topic in the same format. Now, we all know that AI, artificial intelligence, is a buzzword, and this is having applications in several areas. Now, as the name says, artificial intelligence, it means that when you have a particular machine which actually simulates human intelligence, right? So as humans, we have got the intelligence. So if that intelligence is being simulated, exercised by the machine, what we term as artificial intelligence. Now, this artificial intelligence has, the whole mechanism has a basis, right? So AI works on a particular basis. And one of the bases is artificial neural networks. Now, let me first go through the article and then I'll try to explain what artificial neural network is all about. Now, AI, as has been said, it has a potential to bring fundamental changes in the way people live and work. And then this year's Nobel Prize in Physics has been given to two scientists who laid the foundation for AI revolution, right? Now, the prize has been given citing for the foundational discoveries and inventions that enable machine learning with artificial neural networks. Again, once you have got the machine, and once you have these machines mimicking the brain or mimicking the human intelligence, then what we say is that we have got the artificial intelligence. Now, we have got, let me first try to explain how the artificial intelligence works. So we have got a particular machine, a computer, and we have got a series of steps which are fed into the computer. What we usually say as the algorithm, right? Algorithm. So once you have got a series of steps, data is being fed to these machines. Machines keep on reading the data, analyzing the data. And then after it has gone through extensive reading of the data, then a particular person poses the question to the machine, right? And then machine, through its analysis of the data, which it has gone through the algorithm, then it gives you a particular response. That is, machine is actually processing the data. It is then remembering the data and then giving you the exact response. That is what the overall, the simplified version of artificial intelligence is all about. Again, initially when computers were invented, the task was to carry out repetitive calculations, very basic, mundane tasks. And again, slowly with time, what we are witnessing is that these computers, they are becoming highly complex. Right? We are witnessing the emergence of ChatGPT, Gemini, and other AI platforms, right? Self-driving cars. So for these, you need the artificial neural networks. For these, you need the machine learning so that the machine on its own can learn the data and then gives you a prompt response, an exact response, correct response. So what we are trying to say is that it was because of the efforts of Hoffield's revolutionary work in 1980s, and he is basically a theoretical physicist with interest in molecular biology. Now this particular person, he actually built an artificial neural network resembling the network of nerve cells that allowed the computer systems to remember and learn. Artificial neural network. So neural network is something which is present in our brains, human brains. Now that is something which is organic in nature. Once you have got the machines which mimic the same network or the same functioning, what you call is artificial neural network. So if you define what artificial neural networks are, they are algorithms that allow computers to learn and remember while processing data. So the machine is also learning and remembering the data. They essentially imitate the way human brains work. Neural networks comprise of interconnected artificial neurons divided into three layers. So you have got three layers. First is the inner layer. Then you have got the hidden layer, and then you have got the output layer. So the inner layer is basically something which actually receives the input, right? So it receives the input. Then you have got the hidden layer, which actually tries to process it. So the hidden layer processes it. And then we have got the outer layer, which actually transmits the result. So if you want to analyze it simply, what you can say is that the artificial neural network comprises of three layers: inner layer, hidden layer, and outer layer. So what happens in inner layer is that it actually receives the data. The hidden layer actually processes it, and then the output layer, it gives you the data, the final data. It transmits the data, right? The number of inner and hidden layers, it actually depends on the complexity of the problem. So as the complexity increases, the number of these layers also increases, right? So initially, when he worked upon the artificial neural network, it was restricted to basic things, right? And you can say is that it was because of the work of the Hoffield that this particular network, it gave the information with respect to the image or song, and it captures the entire pattern in one go. Again, slowly with time, what we witnessed was that this work of Hoffield, it was actually worked upon, right? And then we had Hinton, who actually took over the idea of this Hoffield and worked upon that particular idea to make this system of artificial neural networks and machine learning more complex, right? So that these machines can perform more complex tasks. Hoffield network could recognize simple patterns or shape, but Hinton's advanced model could understand the voices and pitches, right? Again, what we are trying to focus upon is that there is a particular technology, and that mechanism is known as back propagation, right? So this particular mechanism is known as back propagation. It enabled the artificial neural networks to learn from previous mistakes and improve itself. Again, what we're trying to say is that the machine is in a constant phase of learning. It is giving you a response based on the learning of the data, right? You are feeding the data, the machine is learning, and then the accuracy of the data is increasing, right? Because the machine is constantly learning the data. The process of continuous learning improvement by training on the large data sets led to the development of deep neural networks, and this contains multiple layers, as we just talked about. So initially we had, as we said, that the number of layers processing the data in the artificial neural network, that would keep on increasing as the complexity of the data would increase, right? Deep learning is at the heart of modern speech and image recognition, translation, voice assistance, and self-driving cars. Machine learning is being used in a variety of fields. We all know that. Be it the ChatGPT or the Gemini or other artificial intelligence platforms. Machine learning helps us to focus on those data sets which have greater possibilities for new or interesting information. In 2018, Hinton was awarded the Turing Prize, the most prestigious award in computer science. Again, in the end part, the article mentions that this is not the first time that Nobel Committee had picked a computer science breakthrough for the Nobel Prize in Physics. In 2007, Physics Nobel was awarded for the work related to data storage devices like hard drives. So what the crux of the article is that we have got two people, Hoffield and Hinton. Both have worked in the two very important domains of artificial intelligence. The first is artificial neural networks, and the second is machine learning. So primarily, the foundation for the artificial neural network was laid by Hoffield, and then we have got Hinton, who worked upon this idea and came up with more intricate and complex algorithms. And then he came up with the machine learning aspect, which is being used extensively in the artificial intelligence mechanisms these days. This is what you need to know with respect to this particular article. So coming to the next article, it is with respect to the shutting down of the UK's last coal-fired power plant. Now, again, please understand, this particular article, it has a lot of information, and that information can be used in your answers. There is not much to understand in this article, but there is a quite good points which you can quote in your answers. In fact, also in your essays, right? So what this article is trying to say is, what the author is trying to say is that we had a particular transition by Britain, right? From a heavy dominance of the coal-fired power plants to that of the transition to the green energy sources. What all lessons India can learn from Britain, right? And it also gives us the number with respect to the emissions, right? And it also gives the reasons which were responsible for this transition in Britain. And then it also talks about the same situation in India. Now, what the author says is that this particular shutting down of the Britain's last coal power plant in Nottinghamshire is a milestone and indicates hastening of ongoing paradigm shift in the energy production globally. Again, what we are trying to say is that we are shifting from the coal-based power to that of more green sources of power. And this has been manifested in the Britain's switch to more green sources and the end of coal power plant. Now, what people have been saying is that there is a need to replicate what UK has done. But again, there has to be a specific approach for the developing and the least developed countries. We cannot directly, adopt the idea or the phase or the process which UK actually adopted, right? So there has to be a more tailored made approach, and that would be required for developing and least developed countries. Now, what the author is trying to say is that it is not because of the Britain's pledge of 2015, that is the Paris Pledge, to bring down the unabated coal-fired power to zero by 2025. It is because of a lot of reasons, right? What the reasons are? So we had the Great Smog of London of 1952, and it led to the enactment of several environmental legislations. For example, we had the 1956 Clean Air Act in Britain. Now, this actually included geopolitical, environmental, economic, social pressures. Then we had the discovery of natural gas in the North Sea in 1965, and then the desire to move away from the coal imports from the Soviet Union. Because please understand that UK and US were partners, and then you have got the common enemy for UK and US, and that was Soviet Union, right? Then it also had the issue with respect to the depleting domestic reserves, and this made the mining uneconomical. So these were some of the causes which actually led to the rise in the costs of coal power, and then the Britain had to make the transition. Again, what we are trying to say is that in this particular article, the author is stressing upon the fact that India and China have also committed. So we had the 2021 Glasgow Conference of Parties, where India and China stood out seeking the amendment to the final declaration and having the phrase phasing down and not phasing out. That is what we are saying, is that we'll have a phasing down strategy and we'll not all at once phase out the coal usage, right? India pledged to achieve net zero emissions by 2070 and meet half of its energy needs from renewables by 2050. Now, if you look at the cumulative emissions, now the author is trying to give a comparative analysis. What the author says is that India is the third largest carbon emitter behind the United States and China, emitting 2.9 gigatons in 2023, far ahead of UK's 384 million metric tons. But if you look at the per capita, so what we need to keep in mind is that India's population is almost over 20 times that of the UK, right? And therefore, moreover, India's per capita emissions were 2 tons in 2023, less than half of the global average of 4.6 tons, and almost a third of the UK's 5.5 tons in the same year. Please, this particular information becomes important. So these type of information points should be used in your answers, be it the essays, right? So that you can increase the credibility of your answer, enrich the quality of your answers, right? Also, we have got a particular analysis by the Carbon Brief, which says that the historical emissions of the nations between 1850 and 2024, till the closure of the Nottinghamshire plant, took into account the carbon footprint as colonial powers. Now, the report says that the UK was at the 4th place with emissions touching 10.4 billion tons. And then at the same time, what the author says is that Britain built the earliest known public coal-fired plant in 1882, and then coal became the mainstay in the Britain, powering homes, industries, businesses well over for a half a century. Coal employment peaked in 1920, employing 1.2 million miners at about 3,000 mines nationwide. Now, this is actually trying to give you a scenario. It is not really needed for the exam, but the author is trying to give you a picture so that you can analyze that how India should also follow its transition from a coal-based power to that of more green sources. Britain dominated the coal exports in the early 20th century, accounting for 30% of the global exports in 1913. The UK's peak thermal power consumption was in the 1950s and 60s, when the 90% of the energy was generated by coal. So we have got these developed countries, right, who are asking India to actually switch to more cleaner forms of power. But again, what they need to realize is that there has to be equity in climate talks, right? And we have got these countries like UK or US. They were totally dependent on the coals for so many years. And that has to be obviously considered while we are looking at the equity in the climate talks. Now, if you look at the India's coal story, so now this is also a very important point for the prelims. It can be asked. So India's first coal mine, the Raniganj coalfield, it was basically in the areas of West Bengal and Jharkhand. While it was established as early as 1774 by the British East India Company, please see that who actually started the coal mines in the country. It was primarily the Britishers, and led to large-scale coal extraction from much of India's eastern and central states. India's first coal-fired plant was the Hussain Sagar Thermal Power Plant in the 1920 in the Hyderabad, and it powered the twin cities of Hyderabad and Secunderabad. But it was not until 1956 when the Trombe Power Station came up near Mumbai, right? The average age of India's coal-fired plant is about 12 years and a few decades before they can be decommissioned. Again, what we are trying to say is that Indian coal plants are not as efficient, right? And they need to be decommissioned quite early. And India has exported coal to neighboring countries, but it has largely used the reserves for domestic power production. Importing coal as power demand, importing has also been done because of the increase in the power demand. India is yet to reach its peak coal production and consumption, which is expected to be between 2030 and 35. So the peak production and consumption of coal would be in 2030 and 35. Very important point. About 80 years since Britain reached this spot. About 70% of the energy is currently from coal, accounting for 218 gigawatts of the installed capacity. More than 350 operational mines are there, and about 120 new ones have been planned. A study by Global Energy Monitor says that mines provide direct employment to almost 340,000 miners. But again, this is something which is obviously underestimated, right? The number is actually quite large. Then what we see is the author is trying to say is that once you have got the at the peak of the coal production and consumption, about 10 years from now, the coal sector is likely to provide employment to well over 1 million people, more than 10 lakh people. Then the author is trying to give you a comparative picture. It says that the Britain's per capita energy consumption was almost 3 times India's in 2022. The per capita energy consumption in Britain was almost 3 times that of India. So there are certain lessons which India can learn from the UK's transition and also ensure that it does not make the mistakes which the Britain did. Now, Britain transition, the author is trying to give you a picture, is saying that it was committed to phasing out of coal by 2025, when Britain already reduced its use to a fifth of its energy needs. And it has pursued holistic policies. It's not just with respect to the phasing out of coal, but it has had a lot of policies in place, holistic in nature. Holistic transition of not just the workforce of the sector, but also the region and the communities. What are these steps which Britain actually took? So, the retraining programs were started, which were focused upon the sectors that required skills similar to that of the coal mining. So if you have got people, and if you are being shifting, you're transitioning to other clean sources, you'll have to give adequate employment opportunities to these coal miners. So retraining program were done, right? And power generation, such as engineering, heavy machinery operations, maintenance. This was mixed with early retirement and redundancy payments. New education and apprenticeship programs were also there. Community and regional redevelopment of historically coal-dependent regions was there, right? So adequate incentives were provided to these coal mine areas, right? The siting of renewable energy projects, particularly offshore wind farms, close to the major coal-producing regions was also made, so that you can have a shift of these people from the coal mining to that of these renewable energy sources. Then we have got repurposing of the existing grid infrastructure to transmit the wind energy, remodeling the old coal-fired plants for the other forms of energy generation such as biomass. Now this helped to alleviate some of the fears of the job loss and economic slowdown. Again, the policies have been gradual in nature, and it is not just a sudden spark. It is with respect to gradual transition. Gradual decline in coal with growing awareness about the climate change, transparent fixed timelines to transitions enabled Britain's coal phase out. Then what India can learn is that India has set sufficient timeline for 45 years more, because we are actually saying that we would become carbon neutral by 2070. To attain the net zero emissions, India has already begun steady and impressive growth. Now we are actually investing a lot in the renewables. We all know that. We have got a huge number of schemes by the government for the renewable energy sector. But coal-fired energy use has also risen, and the country must begin working on fixing the timelines on plant decommissioning, regional development programs and retraining programs of the miners and power plant workers. Next aspect is India's historically coal-dependent regions are some of the poorest in the country. Now, this is one of the aspects which is a very important one. So we have got these coal mines and these regions in India. They are one of the poorest in terms of the social indicators. So adequate policy incentives should be there for these people. And have workers who have largely transitioned from agriculture to mining. Only a holistic, transparent and early forward planning approach would hasten the transition that is inclusive and just. So what the author is trying to say is that the process has to be inclusive. The process should not be out of just whims and fancies. It should be gradual in nature, and it has to be based on proper facts. And what the mistakes which Britain committed, we should not commit the same mistakes. And so that what we can ensure is we have got a very smooth transition to clean energy sources. That is what the article is talking about. So the next article is with respect to the Global Digital Compact. Now this particular compact, it is primarily focusing upon regulating the digital technologies so as to make them more inclusive, right? There are concerns with respect to different technologies. We have recently just talked about the artificial intelligence. So there are concerns with respect to these technologies, and there has to be proper safeguard mechanism. And for that, we have got this particular Global Digital Compact, which is working upon this particular issue. This is a part of GS2 and GS3. Now, see, let's go through the article. So the article says that in the recently concluded Summit of the Future, which was organized by the United Nations, member countries adopted the Global Digital Compact. Now, again, please understand, this topic can be really important for your prelims, right? And also, there can be a possible question with respect to this particular compact in the mains, right? So do pay attention. Now, this instrument is first of its kind, which is focusing upon the potential of digital technologies with specific aim to harness and regulate them for the common good. So if in prelims is a question, what is the Global Digital Compact and what is the aim? So it is with respect to the harness and regulate them for the common good. Now, the Global Digital Compact, it is not a binding law. Please remember, it is not a binding law, but a diplomatic instrument with a set of shared goals for the government, institutions, firms, and other stakeholders. Once you have got greater adherence to this particular compact by different stakeholders, be it the government, be it the multinational companies or other stakeholders, then what you can say is that this compact may become soft law in different countries. So earlier, the United Nations also came up with two other compacts. So the first was the Global Compact, and this was primarily the commitment of the chief executive officers towards the sustainability principles, and the second compact was with respect to the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration, covering all the dimensions of international migrations. Now, this particular Global Digital Compact, now it is based on the idea that digital technologies are dramatically changing our world. It is but obvious we have got the infusion or the penetration of these technologies in almost all the aspect of our lives, right? So it is obviously 100% true. And they offer potential for the benefits of society, and it is also offering hopes in order to realize the sustainable development goals. And they also at the same time pose serious challenges and concerns. For example, privacy concerns, right? For example, cyber attacks or other things. Next is that the GDC is a collaborative project with the objective of ensuring human oversight over the technologies. So these technologies need to have proper human interventions. That is, they need to be managed by humans, right? As we saw in the very first article, that what is happening is that the e-commerce platforms, their platforms are being run by different algorithms. There is no human intervention. And that is actually leading to it's actually affecting the overall well-being of the gig workers. They are being overworked, right? So that is where what we need to have is proper oversight over these technologies in ways that advance sustainable development. Building on the international law, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the UN 2030 Agenda, the GDC proposes global cooperation in the governance of the data and digital technologies. Now, the UN member countries have committed to establish two panels. First is Independent International Scientific Panel on Artificial Intelligence and a panel for global dialogue on artificial intelligence governance. The goals include closing the digital divide. Just pay attention. You need not to memorize, but have a good understanding of this. Closing the digital divide, including everyone in the digital economy, improving the access to data, and advancing responsible and equitable data governance. The compact's principles are based on inclusive participation, access to data, digital technologies, sustainability, trustworthy technologies, and a free and competitive market. That is, see, generally, whenever we talk about this digital realm or digital technologies, we focus upon these aspects to make it more inclusive, to make it more participatory, to make it more competitive, right? To make it more fair, right? So these are the aspects which the same GDC talks about. Now, digital goods and services, to address the digital divide, the GDC proposes digital public goods, right? What it means is that which includes open source software. What it means is those software which can be easily used and easily manipulated by the users, and they are based on open source, right? So it's not that their source is restricted to few entities. Its source is open. Anyone can access and basically make amends to that particular software. Open data and open AI models, plus adherence to privacy and the best practices. It also acknowledges digital public goods' ability to drive the social change as element of digital public infrastructure. What we are focusing is that the digital public goods should also ensure that it is increasing the social standards of the people. Development and use of shared digital systems according to the specific priorities and needs of stakeholders. GDC envisions partnerships including with private entities. So please understand, it's not just about the government. It's a multi-stakeholder approach where you have got the private participants, you have got the government, you have got other stakeholders as well. Now, what are the issues with respect to the GDC? The first is that it is based on the public-private partnerships with respect to the digital products. Now, and this was a particular European experience. What the authors are trying to say is that the openness in the context of digital public infrastructure may be limited by contractual requirements such as non-disclosure, confidentiality, and protection of intellectual property. See, if you have got the incorporation or the inclusion of private parties, what happens is that this can actually become a source of contention. And because there are issues with respect to the non-disclosure, there are issues with respect to the confidentiality, there are issues with respect to the intellectual property. So that becomes a bone of contention. Next is GDC adds little to the existing frameworks of internet governance. Importantly, it calls for digital technology companies to self-regulate. Now, again, self-regulation is something which has not been good, and there has been concerns with respect to the ineffectiveness of the self-regulation processes of various enterprises in the digital realm. Next is the GDC recognizes interoperable data governance as essential to foster innovation and promote the economic growth. See, it is trying to focus. The GDC is saying that we would make the data more interoperable in nature so that it can be easily shared. But there are issues with respect to the processing of data, and it may amplify the risks of absence of effective personal data protection and privacy laws. Right? Again, if the data is freely accessible, that has a concern with respect to different stakeholders, be it the individual stakeholders or be it the countries. Then the compact stresses on achieving the SDGs within a paradigm where the governments, private entities track, collect, and analyze the data to measure the progress, underscoring the importance of governing data in the public interest. For this, the compact proposes to give corporate entities more power in the data and the internet governance. However, it fails to emphasize the countervailing measures required to stave off the monopolistic control. Again, what it is trying to say is that if you have such a situation, what would happen is that if you are giving a lot of powers to these companies, these MNCs, they would have a monopolistic stature, right? Monopolistic role. And that is obviously not good for the overall competition and overall market per se. Next aspect is how you are linking the GDC and the United Nations. So the author is trying to say that in the 21st century, data is oil, that is, it is as valuable, and even its use is embedded in extractive industries. See, the technology, this particular digital technologies, they are highly energy intensive in nature, and they are obviously one of the largest sources of pollution. Explosive growth of generative AI models. The GDC acknowledges issues in the AI governance but has little to offer in terms of concrete solutions or strategies. Similarly, the GDC does bat for data flow with trust. But again, there are issues with respect to different countries. So the countries have come up with the idea of digital sovereignty. That is, the countries are claiming that the data should not be shared out of the boundaries. And that is primarily a concern. So if you are at one hand looking for and you are vouching for this idea that data should be spread and it has to be made freely accessible. But on the other hand, what you're seeing is that different countries, they're actually saying that we need to exercise the digital sovereignty. So there is the contradiction. Against the spirit of digital sovereignty, specific laws that require data about citizens to remain within their borders. Finally, the GDC links various objectives and proposed actions with the relevant SDGs. Again, at the time the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals came, there was no prevalence of such magnitude of these technologies. But again, if you're trying to link now these technologies with the SDGs, it might pose some challenges. So, given the unimpressive record of the nations in realizing the SDGs, it is doubtful whether the add-on compact like the GDC could make a difference. So, the different UN states, they are striving to find ways to work with and regulate the big tech while also asserting their digital sovereignty. So, we also know that in India, we have got the Competition Commission of India, right? And that has lodged several complaints against the monopoly exercised by different digital platforms, be it the Google, be it Paytm or other things. So what we are seeing is that there is the issue of digital sovereignty. And again, at the same time, the GDC is trying to promote the spread of data more accessible, to make the data more accessible, and there is the contradiction over there. Thus, global governance of digital technologies is too complex to be captured or fixed by a single entity. What is needed is that we need multilateral as well as regional negotiations to address the jurisdictional, regional, or local needs. Finally, what the GDC is trying to say is, still the GDC can help with the capacity building and with the South-South and North-South collaboration in the development of digital public goods, so that it can be more inclusive in nature, so that different stakeholders get benefit equitably. In sum, the GDC may not result in a paradigm shift in the world's governance of digital technologies, but it can definitely facilitate the significant and tangible outcomes if members take it seriously. Objectives and the aspirations, the aims of GDC are definitely very good, but there are issues with respect to the implementation part, right? And the issues are not restricted to a particular country, but the issues are widespread in nature. Be it the monopoly exercised by the digital companies, or be it the digital sovereignty, or be it the unimpressive record of different countries in making sure or making sure that they fulfill the SDGs, right? They manifest the SDGs. That is something which this article talks about, and this can be important for your exam. So coming to the next article, it is with respect to a report which is by the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. Now, this has given some of the data with respect to, has talked about the religious freedom in India, and this has evoked a very strong response from the Indian government, right? So we'll see what this particular body is all about. So we have got the Washington DC based United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. Now, this on October 2nd released a particular report, an update on India, and it said, the words quoted were collapsing religious freedom conditions. Now, it gave a detailed explanation. It said that how throughout 2024, individuals from the minority communities have been killed, lynched by vigilante groups, religious leaders have been arbitrarily arrested, places of worships have been demolished, and Indian government now has rejected these claims made by this particular report as that this organization is a biased organization. Now, what is this particular body, United States Commission for International Religious Freedom? See, it is an independent, bipartisan US federal government agency. It's a US federal government agency, remember, right? Now, it was created under the 1998 International Religious Freedom Act. It monitors the universal right to freedom of religion or belief in different countries other than that of the US. Its assessment of countries are based on international human rights standards, and we have in particular the Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, this particular commission, it is different, it is distinct from the Office of International Religious Freedom, right, which is a part of the United States State Department. The IRF also releases the annual reports on religious freedom. Please understand, the commission is different, and we have got the International Religious Freedom, which is a part of the US State Department. Both the bodies are different. The IRF's stance is more consequential for bilateral relations. That is, that has more sort of an effect on the bilateral relations. If the IRF, that is a part of the State Department of the US, comes up with the same words, that might have more evocative stance by the government, right? And more stressed relations when we talk about the bilateral aspect. Now, the US IRF monitors the religious freedom conditions across the world, and it is basically coming up with these reports, putting out a report every year, and it primarily categorizes countries in two ways. First is country of particular concern, CPC, and then we have got the State Department's special watch list. What is CPC? Countries that commit systematic, ongoing, egregious violations of religious freedom would be designated as CPC. Countries whose governments engage or tolerate in severe religious freedom violations but do not rise to the CPC standard of systematic, ongoing, egregious would be included in the special watch list. The US State Department, it accepts this commission's recommendations and designates a country as CPC, right? And then we have got the IRF, then it has a range of policy options including the sanctions. Again, what has this particular commission to say for India? So, what the report says is that the religious freedom in India in 2024 has been deteriorating and concerning trajectory. It stated that the Indian governments, through the legislations like Citizenship Amendment Act, or we have the rules which were published this year in May itself, through the enforcement of discriminatory legislation like anti-conversion laws, cow slaughter laws, anti-terrorism laws, continue to repress and restrict the religious minorities. Now, these are the words which are used by this particular commission. Indian officials have repeatedly employed hateful and derogatory rhetoric and misinformation to perpetuate false narratives about religious minorities, inciting widespread violence, lynchings, and demolition of places of worships. Now, India has been designated as country of particular concern. How has India responded? Obviously, it has said that this particular organization is a biased organization with a political agenda, and it continues to misrepresent facts and peddles a motivated narrative for India. And therefore, India rejects this malicious report. Now, is this particular agency is biased or agenda driven? See, the reports of this particular agency, they are backed by research and numerous citations. In case of the country update on India, there is no evident instance of misinterpreted facts, with every claim backed by publicly verifiable documentation. However, the timing of the update has raised eyebrows and has raised the concerns such as those voiced by the Ministry of External Affairs about the report being agenda driven. The particular commission, this commission, is a body that works with the US government, and notwithstanding its independent status, it has been considered, now this is important, as a tool of UN, of the United States foreign policy. Now, are these recommendations binding? No, they're not. It is up to the United States Department whether or not to accept them, and typically calculations related to bilateral standards and larger foreign policy are kept in mind, because obviously we are two democracies and the United States government cannot actually accept these recommendations. It all depends on them. But again, there are issues with respect to this particular organization, because not everything what is said in this particular organization is obviously true. And therefore, the Indian government has categorically said that this is a biased organization and the report is malicious in nature. That is what you need to know with respect to this particular article. So coming to the next article, it is with respect to the Supreme Court's directive on the jail manuals in different states, as it has been found that they are discriminatory in nature, right? So this article tries to explain what all things were there in these manuals which made them discriminatory. So the Supreme Court last week struck down a bunch of rules in several state prison manuals, saying that they reinforce caste differences and they target the members of the marginalized communities, especially those who are dubbed as criminal tribes in the colonial era. Now, these rules violated the fundamental rights of the prisoners. What the particular judgment says is, now this particular case was actually filed by a journalist, Sukanya Shanta, on the rules and the provisions in the prison manuals across the states. The day-to-day administration of the prison is governed by the Prison Act and the prison manual in the state or the union territory concerned. Now, the rules in question, they actually deal with the classification of prisoners, how the prisoners are actually classified and how work is actually allotted to them and how the prison work is assigned to them. What the court has said, that the manual has assigned prison work in ways that perpetuate the caste-based labor divisions and reinforce the social hierarchy. It gives the instances that we have got the Madhya Pradesh Jail Manual of 1987, where the prisoners from the Mehtar caste, a scheduled caste community, are specifically assigned the work for cleaning the latrines. Then it also says that we have got the West Bengal Jail Code Rules of 1967, which says that food shall be cooked and carried into the cells by prisoner cooks suitable caste under superintendence of jail officials. So obviously this is something which is discriminatory in nature. Now the Supreme Court has intervened and it has declared all such provisions and rules as unconstitutional and directed the states and the union territories to revise these prison manuals within 3 months. It has also directed the center to make necessary changes to address the caste discrimination in the model prison manual of 2016 and the draft model prisons and correctional services 2023. Again, there's a mention of the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871, so therefore it becomes also important. So we have got the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871, which allowed the British Raj to declare a community as a criminal tribe if its members were deemed to be addicted to systematic commission of non-bailable offences. As a result, several tribes were forced to settle in designated locations, and they faced actually severe restrictions based on stereotypical assumptions about born criminals, including the threat of arrest without a warrant. After multiple changes, we had the act which was actually repealed in 1952, and the former criminal tribes became the denotified tribes. So the Apex Code has noted that the manuals, they reinforce these stereotypes against denotified tribes by classifying them as habitual and non-habitual criminals. So the court has used the example of Madhya Pradesh, where any member of a denotified tribe may be treated as a habitual criminal subject to the discretion of the state government. Now, how these manuals, they actually violate different fundamental rights. So we have got the right to equality. So the court has said that the caste can only be used as a ground for classification as long as it is used to grant the benefits to the victims of caste discrimination and would otherwise reinforce the caste difference or animosity that ought to be prevented at the first place. Then we have got the right against discrimination, Article 15. So the court has said that the manuals both directly and indirectly discriminate against marginalized communities directly through the assignment of tasks such as cleaning and sweeping to the marginalized castes and cooking for the forward castes. So obviously it also compromises Article 15. Then it also has the provision, or the court has talked about the abolition of untouchability. The court has said, and it has referred to Uttar Pradesh rule that allows the convicts to perform duties of degrading or menial character if they belong to class or community accustomed to perform such duties. Again, it has also talked about the right to life with dignity. It says that the right to life with dignity under Article 21 envisages the growth of individual personality and provides for the right to overcome caste barriers as a part of right to life of individuals from the marginalized communities. Then there's a mention of Article 23, that is prohibition of forced labor. It says, the court has said that imposing labor or work which is considered impure or low grade upon the members of the marginalized communities amounts to forced labor under Article 23. Again, this can be important once we are writing the questions with respect to the GS2, the vulnerable sections, how we have got the manuals or the government documents which still actually reflect the biases in the society, and therefore this topic becomes important. And obviously the intervention of the Supreme Court has, and that too on the basis of the fundamental rights, is obviously, which is a silver lining, right? So this is what you need to know with respect to this particular article. Now coming to the next article, it is with respect to a news from the World Health Organization. It says that India has eliminated trachoma. So the World Health Organization has said that India has successfully eliminated trachoma, a bacterial infection that affects the eye. Now India is the third country in the Southeast Asia region to reach this public health milestone. India's success is due to the strong leadership of its government and the commitment of ophthalmologists and other cadres of the healthcare workers. They work together with different partners and ensure the surveillance, diagnostics, and management of active trachoma. Now, see, this topic gives us the opportunity to discuss what all diseases have been eliminated in the country. So we have got the first as the smallpox. The status is eradicated, and the year was 1977. So India, as a part of the global effort led by the World Health Organization, eradicated smallpox in 1977. This was declared globally eradicated in 1980. Smallpox was a highly contagious viral disease, and that caused millions of deaths. Then we have got the guinea worm disease. So it was eradicated in the year 2000. So the guinea worm disease caused by drinking water contaminated with parasitic worms was eliminated in India in 2000. Then we have got the polio, right? So this was eradicated in the year 2014. India was declared polio-free in 2014 after the years of sustained vaccination campaigns. The last case was that of in 2011. Then we have got yaws. So it stands eradicated. The year was 2016. India was declared yaws-free by the WHO in 2016. Yaws is a chronic bacterial infection that affects the skin, bones, cartilage, and primarily affects the rural impoverished populations. Then we have got the maternal and neonatal tetanus. So status remains eliminated. The year is 2015. India achieved the elimination of maternal and neonatal tetanus in 2015. Then we have got leprosy, elimination as a public health problem. So it was eliminated as a public health problem in the year 2005. India achieved the target of leprosy elimination as a public health problem in 2005 through sporadic cases. Those sporadic cases still occur. So these diseases can be asked in a possible question in the prelims. So that's the reason I have tried to emphasize on these particular diseases. So that is it for this particular article. So coming to the last article of the day, we have got the article with respect to the Central Consumer Protection Authority. Now this has slapped show cause notice to the Ola Electric for alleged violation of consumer rights, misleading advertisements, and unfair trade practices. So therefore, this becomes important for us to analyze what is Central Consumer Protection Authority, right? So this was established as a statutory body, right? And it was established under the Consumer Protection Act of 2019. What are the key functions of this particular body? The first is protect the consumer rights, safeguards the consumers from unfair trade practices, misleading advertisements, and exploitations. Next is prevent unfair trade practices, investigates the violations related to the consumer rights, and ensures fair treatment in business practices. Next is ensure safety and quality, recommends actions against the products that pose a risk to consumer health and safety. It can also enforce the recall and refunds, can order the recall of the unsafe goods, order discontinuation of unfair practices, and issue refunds to the consumers. Then it can also impose the penalties, has the authority to impose fines on the companies for violating the consumer rights, such as misleading advertisements or defective products. And that is the reason that it has used the same provision for giving a show cause notice to the Ola Electric. Next, what is the structure? So it is headed by a chief commissioner appointed by the central government, and then you have got other members. For example, we have got the commissioners for goods and services. What is the jurisdiction of CCPA? Central Consumer Protection Authority. It operates nationwide and has the power to take suo motu on its own actions or act based on the complaints from the consumers. What are the key powers? Conduct the investigations into the consumer complaints, take action against the misleading advertisements, impose penalties, or direct companies to take corrective measures. The CCPA, it serves as a central authority to ensure that the consumer protection laws are enforced effectively across the country. So therefore, it is a mainstay of consumer protection in India, and therefore it serves the interests of the consumers. So that is it for today. I hope you really enjoyed the session. As you know, we have shifted to a new pattern. So do let us know through your likes and comments. That is it. All the best. Thank you.